Let's talk wellness now, our time being 4:34. So, years invested in one's spiritual path, engaging in regular meditation, prayer, cleansing techniques, practicing mindfulness can leave us feeling calmer, more focused, more compassionate, and just simply happier. But what happens when we still lose our temper on occasion? More centrally, how do we resist people's resistance? Medina Harverye, Managing Director of Dandelion Breeze and founder of the Bold Women program, joins us now to unpack this. Medina, thank you for joining us. How are you on this Wednesday?
Very well, thank you, Asanda. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for making time. Great catching up with you. It's been a minute.
Yes, it is.
So where do we start with this? Maybe there are, we'll get into maybe the factors because there are external factors and internal factors when we talk of resistance. But let's start with people's resistance and how we can resist that. You get into the spiritual path, you are engaging in your regular meditation and prayer and whatever it is, cleansing techniques and practicing mindfulness, and you're feeling like you're calmer, you're on the right path and you're more focused. And then something happens.
Well, sorry.
Yeah, and you're laughing because you can relate. We can all relate.
Yes, I can. I can truly relate, Asanda. I mean, we're human first, right?
Yeah. And yeah, maybe let's start with, some examples that you can cite in terms of what happens when you are now, being challenged and you are having to deal with people's resistance.
Well, wisdom and spiritual growth really requires conscious effort because, like you just said earlier, there's so many different things that we try to use, from meditation to different techniques. But in the end, we are human, and the world we live in, sometimes there's a force that comes at us. I believe that you really have to build a very, very strong spiritual foundation. Because that resistance, it comes. And in order to build that, it's like when you build a house, it depends on what you're going to build it with. Is it going to be straw, so when the wind comes, is it going to blow it? Or is it going to be built with brick, so that you can actually be solid? And for me, I try to find some kind of a coping mechanism, and the breathing techniques really, really work.
Yeah.
Because when you see the force come at you, it's, what are you going to do? And it happens to the best of us. So I find that I try to look at the different meditation skills that I have and really breathe so that I don't react to the situation. Because as human beings, that's the first thing we do. And you find that you lose everything that you've worked on. Your intention is to be calm, but you react completely differently. So what are my coping mechanisms in order to assist myself in that space? And we grow gradually in order to live effectively, so you have to have those coping mechanisms. And I find breathing works intensely. Because when you take a breath, if you're angry and you slow down your breathing, that helps you so that you don't react to the situation.
Let's take a short break and then we'll talk about the factors so that we all feel normal, Let's cite a bit of examples of what it could be that sort of derails us from this spiritual path or this feeling of calm and focus. And then we'll get into that in a bit, externally and internally. Our time now is 4:38. We are in conversation with Medina Harverye, Managing Director of Dandelion Breeze and founder of the Bold Women program.
#SAFM Sound Awake.
Wellness Corner today, we're talking about resisting people's resistance, and that's our topic, joined by Medina Harverye, a Bold Women program founder and managing director of Dandelion Breeze. So what are some of the external factors, Medina? Let's start there. For example, my kid's driving me off because I might feel like there's something wrong with me for feeling that way. But is that something that can be a factor?
Well, sorry, Sandra, just repeat that. You said your kids.
Yes. So my kids, just pressing the buttons the wrong way and removing me from my calm state as external factors.
Yes, of course it can. I mean, think about life. So you've got your day planned, and you're totally focused on what it is you need to do. Our kids are temperamental. Life is challenging, and you start questioning yourself. That's the challenge. That's where we look and we think, why is it that we're behaving in a certain manner? You've planned to be calm. You've worked on yourself to be calm, and then something just sets you off. And that's because of the mechanical imbalancement sometimes that we all go through. Life is just not easy. I mean, you just look at the pandemic, for instance. I mean, that rocked every one of us. So things had to change. I mean, there was a time where you got up and you took your children to school and you dropped them off, and then you had your space, and suddenly you're working from home and you're trying to deal with things, and there's sounds in the kitchen and children are screaming. We get attacked in so many different forms. So yes, it does set you off. And not just your kids. Sometimes you can be so spiritual and you're connected and you think that you have God's favor, which we do all have. We do have God's favor, but you find that you wake up feeling a certain way. And for instance, you wake up one morning, and as you wake up, you kick your leg on the edge of the bed, and then you go through to the bathroom and something else happens and the glass falls, and it's just one thing after another. But that's the sort of vibration that you're setting off because you are anxious. And at that given time, you don't practice, the meditation techniques or the calmness that you're used to. I believe that we all question self. We question ourselves all the time because things don't go according to the way we would love it to go. But we can't be hard on ourselves. For me, it also depends on the spirituality that you connect with. I mean, there's so many different forms of it. Now, my direction is Christ. And I believe when something like that happens, I just have to go into prayer. I have to be still. Yeah. Because if you're not still, you don't hear the whispers of God.
So that's, I guess, part of the coping mechanisms, which I want to reiterate later as well.
Okay.
Another external factor, and I think we would have all dealt with this, at least if you're an adult, dealing with people who are not learning from their mistakes and they keep seeking your help with the same issues, the same negativity and lack of growth. That can be an external factor.
Yes.
How do we deal with that?
Well, for me, you have no control of anybody else but yourself. And thoughts and feelings and actions, like we say, will happen all the time. But how you react to it is what's important. And so many of us attach ourselves to the outside and to what people think. Now, it comes with practice. You have to really dig deep and be open and conscious enough to want to grow consciously. And exactly like you said, we're not all at the same level of consciousness. So things will come at you, and you just need to be so secure in yourself, to be able to cope. What are your coping mechanisms that you're going to go to when things like this happen? Often we react. And that's not what we're meant to do. It's best, in my opinion, to be silent and then to deal with the matter when there is no emotion involved.
Yeah, and then there will be those internal resistance that we need to deal with. For example, our unconscious thoughts and patterns. Let's talk about how when we find ourselves slipping into old patterns, what happens there?
Well, I think that's when you need tenacity, and you've got to have a plan in place. You've got to follow schedule. And if you follow schedule, then you will find that you will get to a better place. Because if you keep doing the same thing over and over, like Einstein says, you're not going to find yourself having a different result. So how intentional are you? How desperately do you want to change? And we always go to a place of comfort. And that's why we do the same thing over and over. And we don't find a different result. But you've really got to extend yourself. Because in growth, there's uncomfortability.
Absolutely. Your coping mechanisms that we touched on and we reiterate now, you said don't be hard on yourself. You said a prayer also helps. What about the coping mechanism of looking to spiritual teachers for guidance? For example, us Christians will ask, what would Jesus do? Or if you're an African spiritualist, you ask your ancestors for guidance and so on and so on.
Well, I do believe that definitely works because God lives within all of us. You know, God is the center, and we're all destined for greatness. We choose to find the negative. You know, what is it that you want for yourself? So you have to have the faith, and you have to believe. And faith is something that you cannot actually see, but it's a belief. You know, so how strongly is it that you're believing? How strongly is that you're aligning yourself with the faith or the spiritual direction that it is that you believe in? And I think that is really, really important because it's something that has to be done constantly. You know, you have to look up. Now, I strongly believe, you know, if I get onto my knees and I ask, the word says, ask and you will be received. The word says, I leave my peace with you. But we do then live in the flesh. Yes, there is this whole spirituality that we all aiming for wholeness. But we are living in a life that is challenging.
Yeah.
You know, but I believe you should not be critical on self. That's the problem. You know, we're always beating ourselves up.
And you did mention, you know, it's about noticing it. That's where it begins, to even know that you need to implement the coping mechanism. And you also talk about taking a few deep breaths. So as you mentioned, those things that we reiterate now, you also mentioned that they need to be done constantly. Anonymous on our WhatsApp just wants to know if music can be another coping mechanism to remove negative energy.
I believe it does all the time. I mean, you think about it. When you play music, it always takes you back. You know, it takes you to a place. But then again, it depends on the type of music you play. You know, if you are going to put something depressing on, then that's not going to be good for you either. But music, I mean, any genre of music, for me, it definitely takes me to a higher place. And I think praise and worship, if you're a Christian believer, you know, that takes you somewhere. I mean, the soft tones of, if you look at when you're meditating, there's silence. But also, if you were in a relaxing space and having a massage and in a space of tranquility, and you hear earth moving, you know, the sound of wind, the sound of the sea, those kind of things definitely take you to another place. They enhance us.
All right. So let's leave it on that note then, in terms of how we resist people's resistance. How do we connect with you, Medina? Also, you have a Bold Women program for our lady listeners.
Yes, that's such a wonderful space, Asanda, where you are able to just be yourself. You're able to connect with like-minded women, and you're able just to share in a safe place. And we can be reached on Instagram on boldwoman_SA. We can be reached on Facebook on Bold Woman. And then we have a landing page, which is www.boldwoman.co.za. And excitingly, we have a Bold Woman event coming up on the 14th of May. And our seats are so limited. So please, anybody that'd like to connect with us, join us and make contact so that you can be part of this amazing day.
All right. Thank you so much again for joining us. All the best, Medina.
Thank you, Sandra. You have a wonderfully blessed day.
Thanks, our pleasure. Medina Harverye, Managing Director of Dandelion Breeze and founder of the Bold Woman program.